You are standing in the flickering candlelight of Reims Cathedral on a bitter December morning in 1137 AD. The air hangs thick with incense and the metallic scent of fresh blood dripping from the altar, where a white dove has just been sacrificed. Through the stained glass windows, winter light casts eerie shadows across the stone floor as nobles in silk and ermine whisper prayers that sound more like business negotiations. At the altar stands Eleanor of Aquitaine, barely 15 years old, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of what's about to unfold. She's about to marry Louis VII of France, but this isn't the romantic fairy tale you might imagine. This is medieval Europe, where marriage was warfare by other means, and love was a luxury few could afford. The priest approaches with a cup of wine mixed with something else, something that makes Eleanor's stomach turn. It's the blood of the sacrificed dove, symbolic of the Holy Spirit's blessing on their union, but also a reminder that this marriage will require blood to seal it. Behind her, she can hear the rustle of silk as her new mother-in-law adjusts the ceremonial chain that will bind Eleanor's wrist to Louis's during the vows. The chain is made of iron, not gold, because iron represents strength and permanence. Once locked, it cannot be removed until the marriage is consummated, witnessed, and blessed by God himself. But the chain is just the beginning of tonight's bizarre rituals. After the ceremony, Eleanor will be stripped naked by the women of the French court, examined for proof of her virginity, and then dressed in a special gown that has been blessed by 12 different priests. The gown has no fastenings, designed to be torn away by her husband as a symbol of his dominance over her body and her lands. What follows will be witnessed by nobles, clergy, and servants who will wait outside the bridal chamber, listening for the sounds that will confirm the marriage is legally binding. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Welcome to the twisted world of medieval royal marriage customs, where love was treason, politics was foreplay, and wedding nights were public spectacles that would make modern reality television look tame. Today, we're peeling back the romantic veneer that Hollywood has painted over medieval marriage to reveal the brutal, bizarre, and often horrifying reality of how Europe's most powerful families conducted their most intimate affairs. Medieval royal marriages weren't romantic unions between two people who had fallen in love. They were elaborate business mergers conducted with all the cold calculation of a corporate takeover. Every kiss was a treaty, every embrace was an alliance, and every pregnancy was a potential shift in the balance of European power. The customs that surrounded these marriages were so strange, so intrusive, and so psychologically damaging that they would be considered crimes in any modern society. But to understand why these customs existed, we need to understand what was at stake. When Eleanor of Aquitaine married Louis VII, she wasn't just becoming Queen of France. She was bringing with her the largest and wealthiest duchy in Europe, lands that produced more wine, grain, and gold than many entire kingdoms. Her marriage contract wasn't written in terms of love and devotion, but in detailed specifications about inheritance laws, military obligations, and the precise conditions under which the marriage could be dissolved. The document was 47 pages long and included provisions for what would happen if Eleanor failed to produce a male heir, if she committed adultery, or if she was found to be practicing witchcraft. The preparation for a royal wedding began months before the actual ceremony, and it involved customs that would shock even the most jaded modern observer. The bride-to-be would undergo what was called the purification process, a series of rituals designed to cleanse her body and soul for her future husband. This included monthly examinations by court physicians to verify her virginity, daily baths in water blessed by priests, and a diet restricted to foods that were considered spiritually pure. Meat was forbidden for the final month before the wedding, as was wine, spices, or anything that might inflame the passions inappropriately. But the physical purification was nothing compared to the psychological conditioning. Royal brides were subjected to intensive education about their duties as wives, which included detailed instruction about sexual positions, the importance of submitting to their husband's will, and the consequences of failing to produce children. They were taught to measure their worth entirely in terms of their ability to bear sons, and they learned that their personal desires and preferences were not just irrelevant, but potentially dangerous to the stability of the realm. The wedding ceremony itself was a masterpiece of public humiliation disguised as sacred ritual. The bride and groom were required to fast for 3 days before the ceremony, drinking only water blessed by the Pope himself. On the morning of the wedding, they would be dressed by teams of servants in garments that had been blessed by dozens of priests, each piece of clothing carrying symbolic meaning that reinforced their roles in the political alliance being forged. The ceremony took place not just before God, but before representatives of every major power in Europe. Foreign ambassadors, rival nobles, and church officials all attended not as guests, but as witnesses whose job was to verify that the marriage was conducted according to the complex laws that governed royal unions. Every word of the vows was scrutinized, every gesture analyzed for political significance, every facial expression interpreted as evidence of the bride and groom's commitment to their new alliance. During the ceremony, the couple would be required to drink from a shared cup that contained wine mixed with various substances designed to ensure fertility and fidelity. The exact recipe was a closely guarded secret, but historical records suggest it included herbs, animal blood, and in some cases, ground pearls or precious stones that were believed to have magical properties. The taste was reportedly so foul that many brides and grooms would vomit during the ceremony, which was interpreted as evidence that evil spirits were being expelled from their bodies. After the religious ceremony came the political theatre of the wedding feast, where the real negotiations took place. The seating arrangements alone required months of diplomatic planning, as every placement sent a message about alliances, rivalries, and the shifting balance of power in medieval Europe. The food served was chosen not for taste, but for symbolic meaning, with each course representing different aspects of the marriage alliance being celebrated. But all of this elaborate ceremony was merely the prelude to the wedding night, where the bizarre customs of medieval royal marriage reached their most invasive and psychologically damaging extremes. The consummation of a royal marriage wasn't a private moment between two people, but a public event that required witnesses, documentation, and proof that would satisfy the legal requirements of multiple kingdoms. The bridal chamber was prepared according to ancient rituals that mixed Christian symbolism with pagan fertility magic. The bed was blessed by priests, surrounded by burning candles arranged in specific patterns and decorated with herbs that were supposed to ensure conception. The sheets were specially prepared, often embroidered with symbols representing the joining of the two family lines, and they would be carefully preserved after the wedding night as legal evidence of the marriage's consummation. The bride would be escorted to the chamber by a procession of noble ladies, each carrying symbolic items that represented different aspects of her new role. Some carried flowers that had been blessed for fertility, others held mirrors that would supposedly reflect any evil spirits trying to interfere with the consummation. The most senior lady would carry a ceremonial knife, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of the bride's willingness to shed blood for her new family, literally and figuratively. Once inside the chamber, the bride underwent what was euphemistically called the final preparation. This involved a physical examination by the court's most trusted midwives and physicians, who would verify not only her virginity, but also assess her physical suitability for childbearing. They would examine her hips, her breasts, even her teeth, looking for any signs that might indicate problems with future pregnancies. The results of this examination were recorded in official documents that would become part of the marriage contract. Meanwhile, the groom was undergoing his own bizarre preparation ritual in a separate chamber. Male relatives and advisors would gather to offer advice about his performance, which was considered crucial, not just for personal satisfaction, but for political stability. He would be given various concoctions designed to ensure his virility, mixtures that often contained dangerous substances like mercury, lead, and exotic herbs imported at enormous expense from distant lands. The actual consummation was preceded by prayers that lasted for hours. Priests would bless the bed, the couple, and even the air in the chamber, creating a religious atmosphere that was supposed to sanctify what was essentially a political and economic transaction. The couple would kneel together while Latin incantations were recited, many of them so ancient that even the priests didn't fully understand their meaning. When the religious ceremonies were finally complete, the witnesses would position themselves outside the bridal chamber. This wasn't a matter of curiosity or perverted entertainment, but a legal necessity. The marriage wasn't considered valid until it had been consummated, and that consummation had to be verified by reliable witnesses who could testify in court if the marriage was ever challenged. They would listen for specific sounds, wait for particular signals, and time how long the consummation took, all of which would be recorded in official documents. The morning after brought its own set of humiliating customs. The bloodied sheets would be examined by a panel of experts that included physicians, midwives, and senior nobles. They would look for evidence of the bride's former virginity and signs that the marriage had been properly consummated. These sheets would then be displayed publicly, often hung from the castle walls for all to see, as proof that the royal line had been properly joined. But the scrutiny didn't end with the wedding night. The new bride would be watched constantly for signs of pregnancy, her every meal monitored, her daily activities restricted, her body examined regularly by court physicians. If she didn't conceive within the first few months, she would be subjected to increasingly desperate and dangerous treatments designed to encourage fertility. These treatments often involved consuming toxic substances, undergoing painful procedures, and participating in bizarre rituals that combined medieval medicine with ancient superstition. Some brides were required to sleep with dead animals that were supposed to transfer their fertility. Others were forced to drink concoctions made from ground unicorn horn, which was actually narwhal tusk powder that could cause severe poisoning. The psychological pressure on these young women was enormous. They knew that their value was measured entirely by their ability to produce male heirs, and that failure could result in annulment, imprisonment, or even execution on charges of witchcraft. Many developed what we would now recognize as severe anxiety disorders, depression, and eating disorders. But medieval medicine had no understanding of mental health and often attributed these symptoms to demonic possession or moral weakness. The husbands faced their own pressures, though they were generally less severe. A king who couldn't produce an heir was seen as cursed by God, potentially leading to rebellion, invasion, or civil war. This created an atmosphere where sexual performance became a matter of national security, and bedroom activities were subject to the same scrutiny as military campaigns or diplomatic negotiations. Some royal couples developed genuine affection for each other despite these bizarre circumstances, but many lived in a state of constant tension and mutual resentment. They were trapped in marriages that served everyone's interests except their own, surrounded by customs that treated their most intimate moments as public property. The children born from these unions inherited not just kingdoms and titles, but also the psychological trauma of growing up in families where love was subordinated to politics, where their parents' relationship was defined by legal contracts rather than emotional connection, and where their own future marriages would follow the same twisted patterns. As we return to that candle-lit cathedral where Eleanor of Aquitaine once stood trembling before her destiny, we can finally understand the true cost of these medieval marriage customs. What we've witnessed wasn't romance, but rather the systematic transformation of human intimacy into political theatre, where every kiss carried the weight of kingdoms and every embrace was measured by its diplomatic value. The bizarre rituals we've explored, from blood-mixed wine to witnessed consummations, from iron chains to public sheet examinations, reveal a world where personal agency was sacrificed on the altar of dynastic ambition. These weren't just strange customs, they were the instruments of a system that treated human beings as political commodities, where teenage girls became living treaties and wedding nights became affairs of state. Perhaps most disturbing is the recognition that these practices weren't aberrations, but logical extensions of a worldview that valued bloodlines over human dignity, political stability over personal happiness, and dynastic continuity over individual freedom. The psychological scars inflicted by these customs rippled through generations, shaping the character of entire royal lines and influencing the course of European history. The next time you see a medieval romance in film or literature, remember Eleanor standing in that cathedral. Remember the iron chains and the bloodied sheets. Remember the witnesses and the examinations. Behind every crown lay a human cost that history has spent centuries trying to forget, but which we must remember if we're to understand how power truly operates when it believes itself beyond the reach of human decency.